Hello, hello, and welcome back to Call Your Coven. I'm Bee, I'm your resident numerologist, and my pronouns are she, her.
I'm Jeanna. I'm your resident astrologer, and my pronouns are also she, her.
And I'm Meg. I'm the resident tarot reader, and my pronouns are she, they.
Thank you for following suit with my out of order.
Look, we can be flexible. Nobody ever said we couldn't adapt.
Once you say that, Bee, my brain goes, and we're doing this. So, yeah.
Perfect. Cool.
All doing great.
Well, we are super jazzed to be here again, having another coven chat.
Mhm.
It's been amazing to have these conversations and then just to see how they ripple out into the coven and the community kind of at large.
It feels
Yeah.
very organic, and also in light of like not only everyone's health stuff, but like life things, it like 2 times a month feels very sustainable
Mhm.
for us for the long term, I think, in a way that is exciting because this is not the format we planned on at the top of
Yeah.
our time together.
We were very ambitious when we were planning this, and now I'm really glad that it's settled into a 2 a month. The same thing happened with Card Talk, which is on an unplanned hiatus right now because I'm literally tired and don't have the energy to do everything myself. But it started as a weekly, and then I was like, wow, I can sustain this for like 40 episodes, and now I need to space it out or take some breaks. It's a lot.
It is a lot, and it's a lot for everyone involved. And I think that that's something that we don't consider anymore. When you're thinking about this, you're like, oh, yeah, I have to put something out so regular and I have to be consistent and we have to be consistently getting new people in. And it's also not taking into consideration that to receive all that information in a month, to receive
Mhm.
weekly information is like also not everyone's speed.
Mhm.
So I think, at least from what we've heard, this seems to be sustainable for everyone, both in us making the offering and then the folks who are receiving it. So
Yeah.
that feels nice.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Agree.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to talk about this kind of blossomed really organically out of some of our other episodes, but we're
Mhm.
just going to talk about the craft in a little bit more specifics, speaking about deity relationships and personal workings and a lot of other stuff that feels touchy, but also we're excited to get into it. And we thought a good way to open this would just be an update to the crow story,
Yeah.
which I shared at the top of the June forecast. I had shared about wanting to, or receiving a feather and wanting to make an offering and not really knowing what to do. And Meg and Jeanna set me straight in terms of not jumping to packs, magical packs, essentially.
Mhm.
And it was really great. And after that, I did end up leaving a very small offering of dog kibble because apparently I was on the witchy internet, and crows love pet food, which great. I have that in spades. So I left a little offering, and then I noticed it was at some point it was gone. And then a couple days later, I'm sitting out in the backyard with Stacy, and she had just taken the garbage cans. Like, this is so mundane, but she had just like
Mhm.
taken the garbage cans to the curb, and she was like, "Oh, there's a feather, a crow feather in our front yard." And I was like, "Oh, that's so exciting." And like went out to get it. And it was actually, this is where I'll keep putting myself on blast here, to create a brave and vulnerable space. This feather was not as aesthetically pleasing as the last feather, and I literally was like, okay, it's busted, but I'll take it. And literally the crows were like, you ungrateful bitch. Like, what's wrong with
Oh my God, B.
Yeah, that's
Go
incredible.
on.
I know, I'm so chaotic. I even wrote like, I think this is in the acknowledgments of my first book, but I was like, thank you to like every spirit and ancestor that helped me get here because I'm like a horrible human being to like try and work through. Just like so messy. Um, but yeah, so I have received another feather, so two. I have a feeling that a third feather is on its way to me just because
Mhm.
of other magical workings that we can get into later. But I'm working with like a lot of three vibe folks at the moment.
Mhm.
And I did leave another offering of kibble, obviously with no expectations. It is gone. I do kind of think the squirrels got this one because they were being real rowdy. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah,
they
squirrels and rats and possums also like kibble, but
I
eh.
know. I have a feeling, but yeah, we've been hanging out. It's been really fun.
No, I love that as a way of transitioning us, giving the update first off, which I love that you held off because you had told us some of that, but you held off on the like the aesthetically pleasing part, which is so fucking funny and so you.
Well, because
So
it was such a bitch move, and even Stacy, since the first story involved her, obviously she's involved in
Mhm.
the crows, and
Yeah.
she was like, "Yeah, that was really rude of you. Like they just gave you the gift that you'd been begging for, and you were like, oh, this is ugly."
Iconic behavior.
Oh my God, I love that. No, I super appreciate you vulnerably like sharing all of that by way of transitioning us in. Because I think that in talking about, yeah, like deity, spirit, planetary, ancestral, land relationships, you and Meg are both self-described chaos goblins
Mhm.
about it, and I'm a little bit more structured with it. So I also am really excited to get into it because I think that oftentimes, at least like when I was starting to get into all of this years ago, like it was very easy to get hung up on like the one person who I respected, who I was reading at the time, who like did it their way. And if I had instincts that were not their way, then that I had to work through a lot of like, oh, am I doing it wrong? And so I'm really, really excited for us to talk and for all of us to be bringing like very different ways of being in relationship, navigating it, building it. At this point in all of our craft, like we have varying spirit relationships. All of us have varying relationships with spirit, but like we are all also ex-religious girlies. And so at least like my first spirit relationship was with Jesus. So like I think I want to just roll us back and ask like how we navigated, how we even bridged getting into this in this part of witchcraft in the first place. Does anyone want to start or am I starting?
I don't know, Meg, do you want to start?
Sure, I'm probably the most chaotic person to start, but why the fuck not? Jesus was definitely the only real spirit relationship that I had for a very long time. And I know we've talked about this before in different iterations, but when I finally was like, I can't be part of the church anymore, I need to step back from all of this, and I need to step back from Jesus, I didn't really know what else was available. Like, I didn't really know where to go. I didn't know anyone else who was working with anything. I kind of collected some books, but I just like I didn't know anything. And I saw a lot of writings and stories and recommendations of like, just listen to see who wants to work with you and then start building a relationship with them and it'll be totally fine. And I was like, literally, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Listen to who wants to work with me. I don't even think that Jesus wanted to work with me. I just didn't give him a choice for a while and then I gave up.
My
Like,
God.
well, because, like, you know what I mean? Like, church trauma's fuck. But also, like, I ended up leaving the church because it was like, oh, they're not accepting of queer people and Jesus
Wow.
doesn't actually want you. And so it was very like, okay, I guess I don't want this either. But everything I knew about spirit relationships and deity relationship and worship and devotion and all of those things were through this very religious lens that for me was very evangelical, fundamentalist, Baptist all the way down. And so the process of trying to leave Jesus and then think about what might be next, I just stopped praying and it was awful. Like I was so sad. I was so lonely. And then I was kind of like, I have to be working with someone. So I did some research and I picked a god and I started fucking around with it and I didn't know what I was doing and I had a lot of imposter syndrome. And it was really uncomfortable, honestly. And I think what I know now is that I was trying to follow the rules that other people told me about what it looks like when this particular goddess is talking to you or wants to be in relationship with you, initiation rites and rituals and altar setups there was so much that I was trying and none of it really resonated. And I know now that that's because I was trying to follow someone else's rules and that's not how my magic works or how my anything works. But at the time, it just felt bad. Like the whole thing just felt bad. And I don't know if either of you have had similar experience to that. Well, I know some of you have had some similar experiences to that, but it was very fraught for me. The transition from Jesus to anything else was very emotional and very lonely and very confusing. And a lot of times I was kind of like, I don't think anyone wants to work with me, actually. What am I doing here?
No, that makes me
Yeah.
so
It
sad.
was a really rough time. Like it was a really rough couple of years, like trying to transition. And I mean, tarot helped and, finding other queer people and learning to talk more broadly about religion and spirituality definitely helped. But it was a very emotional couple of years.
Yeah. I think there's something that you said there too that really hooks into at least folks who are formerly part of organized religion, which is
Mhm.
well, you just need to listen. And it's like, at least speaking from, I know myself and Meg grew up a little bit more fundy than you did, be, but like
Yeah.
having grown up deeply in that, like, I come from a line of women who are called prayer warriors, aka witches.
Yep, I was
Um,
also called the prayer warrior.
as yeah,
Sure
as like I
thing.
think both of us were called that as well because there
Mhm.
was, and I've talked about this publicly, but like, when I would pray, like oftentimes I heard Jesus's voice or someone's voice. Like I heard that voice, and by the time I left Christianity, I was very aware of what it meant to hear from spirit and what was just me talking to myself. Like I knew that line. And I think that that can be really challenging for a lot of folks who are coming to witchcraft without a religious background, like who have never
Mhm.
prayed or like been taught to be in that kind of relationship with spirit before. Um, but I think my religious upbringing definitely informed my relationship to these spirit relationships, but in a different way than Meg's. Because like whereas Meg is like Fundy Baptist, just Jesus, nothing else. I grew up across a lot of different churches. My dad's family is who I've mentioned this before. We're close to my dad's side. My grandma basically lived with us for like half my life, like extremely Catholic. And so consequently, I was raised with the decidedly not Protestant idea of guardian angels, and that each of us had a spirit, which is very Catholic, also very Jewish, but in a lot of other traditions. But like, so it was a weird mix of we're Protestants, we only believe in Jesus to save us, like we don't pray to Mary, and simultaneously my mother being like, no, no, you have a guardian angel and your sister has a guardian angel, and there are other spirits in our house. And my mother was also, again, this was the 90s, so it's like the Left Behind books. There was a huge, the year 2000 was coming up and it was hugely apocalyptic, lots of Book of Revelation stuff going on in our house at all times. But my mother was also like very invested in the idea of spiritual warfare, which is you find it in some Protestant churches and not in others, where there's the idea that like quote unquote, whatever you'd like to call them, angels and demons are having kind of an invisible battle on earth in the spiritual realm for people's souls. At least that's the idea I was raised with. So on the one hand, like Jesus was the only one I really talked to, although I did talk to my guardian angel when I was a little kid or whatever was in that role. I talked to
It's so
something.
cute.
Um, but I still like, so leaving Christianity, yes, it was leaving Jesus. That was really painful, but like I still retained the worldview that there is a spiritual realm. I didn't know if it was angels and demons or whoever the fuck like in there, but I did believe that the earth was full of other kinds of spirits, of varying moralities, which is something I've since discarded, like the idea that spirit is inherently moral in different ways. Um, but yeah, so I think that was my background moving into this. And also like even though I moved into tarot and then astrology within the first few years after leaving the church, like Meg, I also completely stopped praying and so stopped that listening. And even as I was reading more about tarot and astrology and like baby little witchcraft things, I was like, I can't work with deity. It just felt too fraught. Like the idea of inviting another authority in to like fill the Jesus void felt so fraught to me for so many years. And so I didn't really start practicing praying again and start kind of looking into ancestral work until the like 2018-ish. So honestly, this is like the newest part of my witchcraft is literally deity spirit relationships because I've been doing them for less than 10 years. Yeah, it's become, the more I get into it, the deeper this becomes the foundation of my entire practice. I feel like having to learn how to pray again, or having to learn what prayer is, period, and the worldview that supports the idea that prayer can be impactful and like actually influence the material world and like everything around us is a big roadblock for a lot of people, no matter their background. Yeah.
Yeah, B, I want to hear your answer to this question, but I also
Mhm.
just want to say that for me, a huge roadblock with transitioning from prayer to Jesus to prayer to other deities is not apologizing and
Mm. Mhm.
like coming at it from a very here's everything I did because I didn't do confession, but
Mhm.
there's a very like name your sins, like acknowledge that you are unworthy, acknowledge
Yeah.
that, all the ways that you have not been faithful or have not been, everything you've done wrong, like list your sins and ask for grace. Like that's a very that it's still something that shows up if I'm not thinking about it
Yeah.
in my relationships now, and I hate it.
And
But I wanted to
also,
name that because if you do come from a religious background, that was something I really, really struggled with, and it still comes up if I'm not careful because it's so
yeah.
ingrained into my prayer practice. That was
Yeah.
probably the hugest shift for me.
Such a, I think, important thing to flag because it took me so long to realize, even though I was reading it like on the internet and stuff, that you can ask spirit for things because, growing up in Jesus' household, you don't ask Jesus for things. You ask him for grace, you ask him like
Mhm.
for gifts of the spirit, but you do not ask for money. You do not ask for physical healing. You do not ask for, you can pray for other people for that, but like asking for especially like material security is not okay. Or was not okay in how I grew up. So it's just that realization was very rough and big. Anyway, yeah. B, I want to hear.
Well,
Sorry,
I'm
that
going to
was
tell my
such a
story at
specific
some
tangent.
point, but I'm going to throw another curveball in here and ask a question first.
Me,
I know,
You have to answer.
I
me, you have to
know.
answer.
I think everybody will figure my story out by the question I'm going to ask. Gina, you
Mm,
said something that was really interesting to me about not wanting to enter into another deity relationship because you did not want to invite authority into your
mhm.
life.
Yep.
So I'm curious, like, does that stand for you that deities do hold authority over you or over people? And my question in that is like, especially after leaving like a high control
Mhm.
upbringing, what where do you land with the idea of free will? Because if it's free will to enter into relationship with deity, then I don't know that that is something I would consider an authority.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people who would wholeheartedly disagree with me.
No, I appreciate you asking that because it's something I really had to unpack. And not also just to say, like, not saying like I didn't want any authority in my life, but just like, like, because for me, the version of Jesus, the version of Christianity that I grew up with was, like you said, the high control, like
Yeah.
literally every single decision, checking in with him if it was okay. Like, I remember in high school, I wanted to apply to be drum major of the marching band that I was in, because I was a band kid. And I literally like I spent months praying about whether I should apply for that. Like that like which sounds so silly and so basic, but that was the level of like check-in. Like this job I want to apply to, is this okay? Like does Jesus say it's okay, And so I didn't want that level of integration and of like I'm accountable to you, and if I
Mhm.
don't do this, then it's bad, like, and I'm a sinner. Like I just really had to unpack that mindset, because I do think that different kind of spirits and deity absolutely have authority. How much, but I am also a free will proponent. So, okay, my answer to this is actually really complicated, and it's also that it depends. But I think that, at least personally for myself, I think I have come to see spirit and deity more as supports, as sometimes parental type figures. My ancestors are very loud, so they need to be wrangled and like, and actually need to be reminded that I'm living and they are not, and I get to do what I want. Like, And whether they want to ride with that, that's okay. I must sound like such a brat right now, but I, yeah, to me, it was really revelatory to realize, at least for myself, that these relationships were relationships and that basically, like, if I wanted to be the kind of person who signed my life over to a deity, because, like, if you do that, I do think it holds.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I do think, but I'm very much a read the fine print, be very specific with what you agree to, with what you promise. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it totally does. It totally does. And I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I just
no,
thought it was really,
yeah.
really interesting. And again, we talked about this earlier, but we kind of did want to preface this whole conversation with like there is no one right way to do things, and there
Mhm.
is really no manual for any of this kind of stuff
Yeah.
because I'll just say the quiet part out loud, like it's all made up. So, like to some extent. And so there, yeah, but people have really strong
Yeah.
opinions
And
about,
also, just to like asterisk that, it's like there are some traditions where there are rules. And like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you're gonna be part of certain kinds of lineages, certain kinds of traditions, certain kinds of ceremonial magic, there are rules. There are like for sure. But all of us are more eclectic individual practitioners. None of us have been initiated in a tradition or are part of that kind of tradition. And we're all very much more embedded in folk magic than in ceremonial. So, yeah, I think that caveat for like how we all work is 100% true. Like, yeah,
Okay, my story.
yeah.
So I am, yeah, just a chaos goblin. I'm kind of in the middle of Meg and Gina in some ways because I
Hmm.
feel like for me, I was always brought to church, but I wasn't necessarily raised in church dogma, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. And so my mom was a singer, and so she sang at different churches. And so I would go with her to different
Hmm.
churches. But then she went to a Catholic church, and I was like, love the costumes, here for the like the liturgical dancers. Yes, please.
Yeah.
But everything else, I was like, no, they would not let me drink the wine or eat the snack. And so I was like, this is not a place for me.
Mm.
And at 7, I looked up churches in the phone book, selected one, and my dad dropped me off at that church every Sunday. And I went solo to church for like the majority of my childhood.
I didn't realize you were that young.
Yeah. And
Wow.
that's like,
But
I
that's
feel like
so
that's such
young.
a 90s time capsule. Like, who on God's green earth would drop their 7-year-old off at a church to go solo these days, you know?
Dude.
Like, it was fully a time capsule moment. Yeah, pre Y2K. Like, that was genuinely like would not happen
Yeah.
anymore. And
Yeah, child services would get called.
right, of course. Yeah, 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 real quick. And I was like an active member of this church as a solo child. Like I would sit in the front row, I would take notes on the sermon in my little book. But I think like the what I really do want to bring to this conversation is just a really deep acceptance that throughout my life, I always felt like to engage was my choice. And that
Mm.
is something that is very much rooted in the foundation of not only my experiences, but who I am as a person and a practitioner. And I'm really grateful for that because it allowed me to dovetail with religion in a
Hmm.
way that, like Gina, you said, it left you with this understanding of a spirit realm. And
Yeah.
it was like, I had that as well
Mhm.
from religion and much, much more. But I came to the church because it allowed me to be present and in communion
Yeah.
with that spirit realm that I felt so strongly connected to.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
so, like, even some of the stuff that I look back at and it's like so cringy, like when, in like Christian rock worship band music, just to like to put your arms in the air and
Girl,
like,
girl, I was
I
there with you. Like,
lived for that shit. Yes, I was like, this is my moment of worship. Like, I was
hmm.
in. And and I had like really magical, present, like spiritual, supernatural experiences,
Yeah.
like while in church settings
Yeah.
or, however that looked. And so when I left the church, it was more because I saw the restrictions of the church and I was like, oh, well, this is no longer my place to practice this.
Mm,
So I feel very fortunate
mm,
that I like religion leaves you with enough to unpack already. You don't have to then like add childhood trauma to the mix, which is why it gets so funky. But angels were a really easy transition for me when
mm,
I started working with spirit. And actually, I've shared this before. My first tarot deck was the Doreen Virtue Angel deck. But when she shifted into evangelicalism, I definitely did take a step back from angels. I had moved so far from that deck anyway in my
yeah.
personal craft, but the whole you do not ask God for things, like you do not ask for angels, that one did strike me as like, oh, am
Mhm.
I doing it wrong? And it was
Yeah.
like one of those moments where,
Yeah.
yeah, and another reason why like I love following a recipe, so I love doing a ritual, but I don't think I have what it takes to be initiated into any one path because I just at some point might choose to not be there anymore and that wouldn't vibe
Yeah.
with like
Yeah.
the commitment made and like the effort put forth.
I
So Jules, I don't know. You go.
I no, I really love that a theme that's emerging is that of free will and how
Yeah.
much agency. And something, Meg, you might have said this earlier around how a lot of language that folks will encounter, certainly that we all encountered, is around being chosen by deity. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think that
Yeah.
issue, not to say that that never happens. I absolutely believe it does happen. I think there is something around this like chosen one bullshit that we especially see in like white American Protestantism, like kind of the mapping of, I don't know, it's like both saviorism with the Jesus stuff, but also this idea that like you have to be, I don't know, have a fucking letter delivered to your house by Odin or Zeus or Hecate or whoever, and like they're gonna tell you that you're one of theirs now. Like, as opposed to, oh, what if I tried to build a relationship? Oh, I noticed that thing today. That statue really struck me. Oh, like just kind of like paying more attention. Oh, I'm going to do research on that. I don't know. It's like there's a lot of chosen one mythology. Hercules is a chosen one out of Greek stuff. Like Meg knows Greek mythology better than I do. It's not like an uncommon motif, but I think it's really interesting that among folks who are like trying to get into spiritual work, this idea that a deity is just going to show up at your house. I mean, I'm being hyperbolic here, but like what it looks like I think is can be so different. The alternative version of that too is like when you see those fucking TikToks that are like how to know. I'm just going to use Hecate because that's like so that's everywhere.
Yeah.
Also not someone who I presently work with, but like Hecate is calling you. Three signs that Hecate is calling you. And I'm like, "Gah." Like
Yeah. But also then what if you're not experiencing those signs? Like that's what I'm saying. It's like
mhm.
it's such bullshit. Also, we just have to mention John Calvin because we said the word chosen like 10 times without mentioning the elect and Calvinism and tulip and predestination and all of this fucking bullshit that
Can you
I grew up
explain
with.
that for people who
So
don't know what that is? I
okay,
love
John
you so
Calvin is
much.
a fuckwit that had this really intense theology that basically said that before you were conceived as a human being, and I mean that in every sense of the word, like before you were imagined as a human being, but when you were merely a twinkle in God's fucking eye, God knew who on earth across all time and space was going to be one of his chosen. And these people are called the elect. And the idea is that there is no way for them to resist the grace of God or to not follow God's edicts and receive salvation because of the sacrifice that Christ made on the cross, because of God's own rules, because this whole thing sucks. So there are the elect and there are the non-elect. And the elect are the people that have their names written in the book of life and are like destined to be saved basically no matter what. And there's this like weird bullshit thing around like technically you've chosen it, so it is your choice and you do still have free will, but God knows who's going to choose him and who doesn't. And if your name's not written in the book of life and if you're not an elect, then any faith you think you have is false. That'll fuck a kid up. And and there's nothing you can do to gain salvation. You are damned no matter what you do. But a lot of people think that they have salvation and are actually wrong, which really will, like, boy, that did such a number on me growing up.
Wait, how do you find out if your name's in the book?
You don't
Die.
know. You don't
You
know.
die. Literally, you don't know. So you, like, I grew up with all of these people renouncing their faith and saying that they thought that they had always thought they were saved, and then they realized that they probably weren't, and now they're trying to do this like intensive work to figure out if God is actually calling them, or if they were being called by someone else or something else. It was such a common thread in my particular religious upbringing, was this idea that your faith could be lost, or you could realize that your faith was never sound. So that's Calvinism in a nutshell. It's a whole time.
Hey.
And if you don't know what any of this is, I love that for you.
No,
And
but
don't
the
worry
thing,
about it.
I think the reason, actually, you know what, I'm going to say it's important that we're talking about this is because so much of witchcraft internet discourse is actually like so much of new age bullshit is 2 stones away. It's like 2 steps to the left of evangelical fundamentalism and the ideas that we're articulating that are actually centuries old within the church around the chosen versus free will. Whereas like then you get this fucking starseed bullshit, which I absolutely emphatically reject. And it's like, by any other name, that's just fundamentalism, baby. Like, and so I think that it's useful to be talking about like actually like really niche evangelical theology because it does inform, especially American like spiritual occultism. It really informs stuff that's here. My unrelated thought, just to share, I think Meg knows this, is that the time that I came the closest to breaking up with my ex-husband prior, when we were just still dating, prior to getting engaged, was over an argument we had about predestination versus free will. Because he was a Calvinist and I am not. I should, man, you know, shoulda, woulda, coulda, but like.
Oh my God. I wish I dated a guy deep enough to have a disagreement about theology and worldview.
You weren't having sex, B. There was nothing else.
Yeah, all you have is niche theology.
Well, and I think it is especially true, everything that's been said for like Western and American and syncretic and internet and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Witch talk, you know, all that. Just to be aware of when structures and systems are really just replicating what you, because it's all human made, right? So everybody that's making something else is doing exactly what we've all talked about here, transitioning from one thing to another thing, floating in and out of perspectives and worldviews and trying to make it work for themselves, and then saying, hey, this worked for me, like let me initiate others into my way of thinking. What we're talking about is like creating an autonomous, like self-authoritative initiate, like we are enough to be having this relationship with this spirit. What does that look like for me? You know, whatever. But it's all just wrestling, like this exploration with like the human and the earthly realm and the spirit realm, and what do archetypes look like and interactions look like, and what do we call that? I mean, that wrestling is universal. I think that's just a human experience. Like one of the things I got into after leaving the church was Buddhism, and all of this wrestling with free will and fate and karmic cycle and transcendence, you know, whatever that means. Like that extends past Western thought, I think.
Yeah. I think I have a story to transition us to talking about relationship and like what does it look like in a very mundane, boring, everyday, you're taking out the trash and then you notice a feather from a crow. Like, but that's it. But that's it. Yeah. I think the earliest spirit that I was quote unquote working with without realizing it after leaving the church was Lilith. Not the one I would recommend that people start with, TBH. But I didn't like sit down one day and say, oh, I think Lilith is calling me. Ooh, I think that, you know, XYZ, like I'm gonna build a relationship with her. I didn't even know if I thought initially that like she was a real spirit or anything, or if she was just like a mythological character in a story. And, you know, I didn't know about egregores and all of that stuff yet. Anyway. And I'm sharing this particular relationship because I've written about it so publicly in my book that I think that anyone who's read my book is like, yeah, of course you work with Lilith, bitch. Like, obviously, we know. But I was at the MFA in Boston when I still was in grad school. Like I was in the process of leaving my ex-husband, in the process of coming out. I was just a fucking wreck. And one of my happy places is art museums. So I was at the MFA, and I didn't know at the time that she was on loan to the Boston MFA from the Met here in New York. I thought she was just there because like she was there the whole time I lived there. One day I was there with a friend, like I was like fucking sad and depressed and a lot of other things at the time, and I just like stumbled into a room where she was Kiki Smith's statue, Kiki Smith's sculpture, I should say, of Lilith was mounted on a wall. And we'll include a link of it in the show notes. I literally have this as a tattoo now. But it's just a naked woman crouching upside down with her head bent, like making eye contact with you as the viewer. It's so creepy. It's so wild. It's so feral. And it just like I spent like probably 15 minutes just staring at and like crying and weeping in front of this sculpture. It was so meaningful to me. It had such a profound impact on like the wildness that I was exploring, that I was trying to embrace out of my Christian good girl, rule following life. And after that museum visit, I started just kind of doing casual research on Lilith, kind of looking up different representations of her, which actually is all devotion. Actually, all of that is relationship. Now I would look back at younger Jeanna, like, 25-year-old Jeanna, and say, hey, babe, that's devotion. That's actually starting to build a relationship with spirit. And I did that for years, even like getting into tarot, getting into astrology, resisting deity, resisting spirit relationship. I was still like doing all this meditative kind of work on Lilith. I literally got, like I said, I have a tattoo of her that ultimately inspired and grew into an entire devotional sleeve. Like my sleeve is all Lilith associated work. It took a really long time for me to realize, oh, I'm actually already in a relationship here. Like, but also again, it's like, would you say that that's being chosen, or would you say that that is, hey, this person's story, this spirit's history, this spirit's story, a representation in the art world of this spirit really spoke to me in a moment where I desperately needed it and inspired me to learn more about them. That's all it is. Like that's one way it can look like that. I think isn't like, it's not like I had a prophetic dream and Lilith like arrived on a great white horse and was like, you are one of my chosen daughters. Like, no, that's not what happened. It was a very gradual realization. And then honestly, like what I wrote about her in my book was a prayer basically that I still like will read to her as a form of devotion. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that because it's awesome. And I know it's public, but I'm
Yeah.
sure a lot of that was not. And
Mhm.
yeah, that statue, if anybody has not seen it, that sculpture,
It's
So beautiful.
incredible.
So
It's incredible.
beautiful. Yeah,
she's not on display anymore, which
I
is
know.
a tragedy.
When I moved, I have a scene of this in my book, but because I didn't know she was in New York. And so when I moved to New York, and also I don't go to contemporary art wings. This is the other piece. The Boston MFA is small enough that you kind of have to see everything. But like the Met, I usually am just going to like medieval, Renaissance, that stuff. But I was with Meg at the Met for the first time, and Meg wanted to go see the photography and the contemporary wing, which I
That's
had
what I
never been
thought.
in years of like going to the Met. I still lived in Harlem at the time, and so I went to the Met like at least once a month. I miss it desperately, but Meg wanted to go to these other sections of the museum, and we were going like up the stairs, and for years she was mounted in a stairwell in the very back of the Met, and I like screamed when we walked by her. I absolutely lost my shit. It was just like a fucking screech owl screech. And then I would go back and I would just like sit with her at the Met and get scolded by security guards for sitting on
Yeah,
the
they don't like
stairs.
that.
Yeah, which is fine because I was like, I'm doing my little devotional prayer time with Lilith at the Met. And yeah, she's not there anymore, which is a great travesty. And I hope that they reinstate her. But I owe my beloved wife for that knowledge and those experiences that I then got to have throughout the my later years in New York, like just going to sit with her.
Yeah.
You've said so much that I think is really key in terms of
Mhm.
practical advice for
Mhm.
connecting with spirits or starting relationships with spirits, which is a very vulnerable thing. And like we've already said, it's a lot of being uncomfortable and being really uncertain, and a
Mhm.
lot of calling your friends and being like, do these crows hate me? Like, please check yes or no. The first, obviously, is that research,
Mhm.
like connection, following that initial impulse and doing research is absolutely part of the process. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes we're like, oh, that's just intellectualizing, or oh,
Mhm.
that's something else. But it's like, how are you going to get to know someone
Yeah.
who, in a lot of ways, cannot speak to you? Like, if you hear, that's great. I don't hear like that. I have things pop in,
Mhm.
but a lot of the times I'm getting to know spirits through hearing their stories
Yeah.
essentially, and
Yeah.
getting to know about them, and then other people's experiences with them as
Mhm.
well. The other thing is like following through lines that don't really make sense to you at first, and being open to experiences that you wouldn't normally have. Like, I love the story of being like, I wouldn't have ever seen her in that back stairwell had I not been open to this other experience. Like,
Yeah.
those things matter, those touch points absolutely matter.
Yeah.
The last one was just making a commitment that might
Mhm.
seem silly to you,
Yeah.
to spend time with, however that looks, that spirit, and build a relationship from there. But a lot of, so I think that's so practical. It's like, do
Mhm.
your
Mhm.
research, follow those impulses, be open to receiving messages and direct communications in unexpected ways,
Yeah.
and then make a commitment, even if it looks like, I mean, I think sitting in with her is incredibly perfect and
Mhm.
beautiful,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but it might not always be that
Yeah.
like specific or present. But it's like, oh, if something, if you hear a song and it makes you think
Mhm.
of that spirit, then it's like you could listen to that song once a day. You could listen to that song once a week. Like, what does that look like in
Yeah.
order to start to build some kind of attentive devotional practice?
And I think that this is also where the research is actually so important because, there are different traditions that have rules, that have things to do, but it's helpful to understand, like you're saying, the stories and also the stories about deity and spirit that have changed over time. Like
Hmm.
so many, especially just like with colonization, with the way that even like ancient Rome really absorbed a lot of the deities of lands that they colonized and conquered. You can trace like a direct line from Inanna to Aphrodite to the Virgin Mary. Just the ways that so many of these spirits are both distinct, but also have different kinds of ways of informing each other is also something I think that is like very hard, at least for my like often black and white ex-Christian brain. Like that's been a really hard thing for me to move toward understanding. But I think that the stories are helpful because there really is a line between like unverified personal gnosis, and like your own personal experience, and then like understanding, okay, what is generally the nature of this entity? Because like for me, doing research on Lilith really helped to set the expectation that she was not going to show up like Jesus. Jesus was there every day. He would talk back whenever I talked to him. Lilith is not like that, yo. Like she is like a goddess of wild places and wild things, and she's in the wind and is wandering. And like there I'll go months and months and months without like having a conversation. Like I might like light a candle, but I'm not like necessarily talking to her, let alone hearing her talk back because she doesn't really do that. Like she's like, I'll show up when I want to. And it was reading myth and reading like writing about her that really helped to set my own expectations. Like around, oh no, this is their nature. Not necessarily this is how they'll show up or how they'll talk to you, but like this is a fundamental part of who they are, and set your expectations in your relationship accordingly. Like,
Yeah, getting to know them and the traditions is like getting to know a friend. It's like, okay,
mhm.
what do your friends like? What are their preferences? And then
Yes.
it's like, okay, if I know that my friend really likes coffee, then when I sit down to commune with them, I'm always going to have coffee. So I feel like there are absolutely things to learn, and that's all so
Mhm.
intimate. And then the expectation, it's like, yeah, I know if I even remotely open the door to Loki, I'm going to come face to face with a spider. So if I'm not ready to do that, then I just don't invoke that conversation. Um, or at least I'm never surprised. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think this is kind of leading us into the question of how it looks in day to day, and how, like, yeah, I mean, how deity, how spirit shows up for us individually, but also what does having a practice or a relationship look like in the everyday.
You're both looking at me. Is it my, do I need to talk now? Okay, I will talk now. I told them before the conversation, I was like, look, y'all both like, you tend altars, you have like very specific deity relationships, and I'm just over here.
Also with some very specific relationships.
Also with some very specific relationships. But yeah, I think the day-to-day stuff has really found its form mostly through instinct and just being willing to kind of try things out and see what works. When
Hmm.
I first got started, I kind of chose a few gods and goddesses that I wanted to work with, and I had relationships with them for a while, but it didn't feel the way that it feels now when I've kind of like found how do I say this in a way that doesn't take an hour? So when I was first like really wanting to kind of expand deity relationships, I didn't know what I was doing, as I said, and I didn't really know how to differentiate what I wanted to do with where I might be welcome. And I was really hesitant. I wanted guidance. Like I felt like I wanted someone smarter and more experienced than me who had spiritual gifts that seemed clearer than mine to kind of tell me if there were deities that were interested in working with me, or if I was already working with deities or spirits or energies and didn't know it. And so I had readings with a couple of different practitioners to be like, can you either help me communicate with this goddess that I've been trying to build a relationship with, or can you help me understand who's around that might want to work with me? Because I was told by many practitioners, and I still am told by many practitioners, your walls are so high, you have to invite them in. It's not that they're not around, it's that they're waiting for you to say hello. And I was like, how do I do that? So for me, working with practitioners to be like, here's what I'm experiencing. What is this about? Or can you tell me who this might be? Or can you help me greet them? Like that was really necessary at the beginning of my practice to kind of understand what that day to day then might eventually look like. Because I was doing altars, I was doing offerings, I was reading Orphic hymns and doing all the prayers. I was trying to kind of follow the rules, and surprise, surprise, that didn't work out for me very well. It was okay, but it didn't feel great. I was talking to a lovely psychic who was who was asking me about my writing practice and my creativity practices, and especially like writing spreads and like having ideas and doing research, because that's a huge part of my devotional practice is being curious and nosy. Um, and and they were like, well, you have a lot of spiritual gifts in your chart, they're just subtle. And I was like, no, I don't hear things, I don't see things, I don't smell things, you know, I don't taste things, I don't like have conversations. And they were like, well, do ideas ever just kind of drop into your head? And I was like, well, yeah, but doesn't that happen to everybody? I thought I was just remembering things. And they were like, no, honey, that's a whole thing. And they were like, it's kind of loud in your chart. And I was like, oh. They were like, what if instead of every time an idea or something new, like a tarot spread, pops into your head, instead of gaslighting yourself that it's something someone else said to you, you accept it as a gift from Mercury, because that's what it is. And it completely rocked my world. It
Hmm.
changed everything, because I was like, oh, I've been doing this the whole time and I just didn't know what it was. And so having that perspective shift and that framework from someone that I trusted to help me put a name and a face to something I've been working with for decade, like it changed everything. And now I'm just like, oh yeah, I just rock with Mercury every day because I write every day, because I have ideas every day. And it's more like, how do we turn the faucet off? That's usually what my work is now. It's like,
Mhm.
how do I say, I love you so much. You have to shut up. Like I have to sleep. Which is not exactly answering the question, but
No, it is
I think
though.
No, it is, because setting boundaries is also not something that is
yeah,
talked about, because you
yeah,
think like, oh, this is something that I want so badly that once
yeah,
it starts happening, or once you can see it clearly, you're like, oh, why wouldn't I want to do that all the time?
yeah, because it's
But
fucking exhausting.
but every Jupiter needs its Saturn. And
Yeah, like truly. And like learning how to relate to Mercury in a way that's not just, hey, let's have coffee in the morning and or hey, my computer's open, what do you want me to write about today or whatever, also necessitates, hey, I'm done for the day. Office hours are closed. See you tomorrow morning. Like
Mhm.
I'm tired. Like the Mercury materia, not in the bedroom, like I gotta sleep. It's like I've had to learn those rules. And again, that's happened with help and practitioners. For me, that has been an essential piece of the process. I would not be able to have the relationships that I have now with, some deities, some stars. I still don't really fuck with ancestors, although I'm kind of trying to, but it makes me nervous for reasons.
I talk to
But
your ancestors sometimes. We do.
yeah,
We make it work because I
we
have
make
a
it work.
very long-standing and deep ancestral practice, and
Yeah,
between mine and sometimes yours come in,
yeah.
it's all good. We're
Sometimes I
making
talk
it
to
work.
yours. Yours feel easier for me to talk to than mine do. But yeah, so if ancestral work is fraught for you, just hi, I see you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a process of figuring it out, and for me, I really had to learn that informality is
Mhm.
essential to my process. Actually, when I try to formalize or ritualize anything, it's like absolutely not. This doesn't work for me. So yeah, I don't keep altars, but I sure do have, a Mercury dime that I wear on a string around my neck.
Like,
I sure do have different things that feel for me like part of the daily practice.
no, your whole mentality is that you are the altar. And
Mhm.
you have like I have a lot of devotional tattoos. You
Yeah.
have a lot of like consecrated jewelry that you
And
will
devotional.
put
I have tattoos
and
too,
and
like they're,
tattoos as well. But like
for
you have
different
a
things.
lot
But
of jewelry that you will like
Mhm.
wear with you and be like, "Oh, this is the day for this this entity, this spirit." And I think again to like the research point, like not that you needed to research that Mercury was like that, but like, oh, your process is also so mercurial. Oh,
Mhm.
your process is also so of the crossroads, of the liminal, of the in between, of the yes and like this is the spirit and the kind of spirits that you tend to work with. Like,
Mhm.
shocking.
Yeah, like
Say
a
less.
lot of psychopomps. Mercury is literally my chart ruler. Like it's very loud in my chart. It's very loud in my work. It's very loud in the themes that I like to explore. It's
Mhm.
it's everywhere.
something that really changed my day-to-day spirituality and like what that looks like to me is becoming disabled. Like was becoming
Mhm.
disabled, because what it used to look like was a physical presence in an altar space for me that was no longer something that I could do
Mhm.
every single day. Or maybe it was, but I didn't wake up with the promise of that. And I think that what has happened in a really interesting way, and I am having these thoughts for the first time, so thank you for bearing with me, is that recently I read a piece on building a 12th house shrine
Mhm.
by
I'm
Joe
So
Maker
good.
yeah.
Ways.
We'll link it in the show notes. It's so
We'll link it
good.
in the show
So
notes for
good.
sure. And something that was really interesting to me about the piece was Joe's distinction between an altar and a shrine,
Mhm.
and what the purposes of those places and those buildings, for lack of a better word,
Mhm.
are. And where one is collaboration, co-creation, that's an altar space, I'm coming here to be active and to do something. The shrine is more devotional. I'm building this space in honor of you. When I come to this space, I think of you. I mean, I'm a Hey Arnold kid, so I'll just never forget Helga's Arnold shrine in the back of her closet. Like that lives rent free in my brain.
Incredible reference.
My
Thank
Yes.
you.
my sister made a Leonardo DiCaprio shrine after Titanic. It was
Yes, she did.
literally like just pictures of him, books about him, Titanic like fan memorabilia. It was a shrine.
Of
We
course,
called it a shrine.
the
Right.
shrine.
That's
Yeah.
sometimes that's just the word that you have to use to
That's
describe the
that's
thing.
what it is. I am a chaos eclectic witch, so like I don't always differentiate between those two words, although I think I've built spaces that would fall into either category, but a
Mhm.
lot of them have overlapped.
Yeah.
But what I'm realizing now is that I had a working altar that when I became disabled, has shifted into more of a shrine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's actually really awesome
Mm-hmm.
because what I built as an altar, and I'm very fluid with my altars, like they'll live forever and I'll just keep adding to them and kind of tending to
Mm-hmm.
them, but then I'll also clear them away and build like entirely new altar spaces. But this one, I've been physically disabled for a couple of years now. And so I will say that this one in my room has not been cleared really since then. I've just been adding to it, which is why I feel like after reading that piece, I was like, oh, this is a shrine. Like, this is becoming a shrine. That's so cool. And I think the reason I wanted to bring it up was that my day to day looks very different now that I don't tend to an altar every day, that I can't physically sit for prayers, whatever that looked like for me. You know, a lot of times just making me the coffee is the energy that I have, and I don't have the energy to then put the coffee beans in the glass and bring them to the ancestors and like do the whole thing. So the informality really works for me as well. But I think that my point is that the shrine space is now holding my daily energy,
Yeah.
even if I'm not there every day. And I really have had to trust that I'm not dropping out of relationship because I'm physically unable to do, like, then you become the altar, wherever you are becomes the sit spot. You know, I think, yeah, I just think disability like changes some of the physical day to day. It's also made it so that I've been like, I'm not available for this right now.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, my actual language would be, I can't buy into that, which a million spirits would scream at me after saying that. But like, there have been times where I'm like, hey, I'm just really not available.
Mm-hmm.
And other times where I've been able to connect. Like right now, I think I'm in a pretty good spot. But
Yeah.
when I was in the hospital, I was like, get every deck away from me. Can't, yeah,
Yeah.
I can't do this.
I
Yeah.
think that's the relationship piece though too, like of setting expectations. Again, read the fine print slash use fine print when if you are I mean, obviously like curiosity, just kind of starting to build a relationship or just like being like, hi, like maybe not in that point, but like I have a lot of thoughts actually on agreements with deity and spirit that I'm gonna get into. But to what you're saying, be like my ancestors cannot expect a candle every day if I am not in my fucking house. Like if we're spending a week up in New Hampshire with my bestie, like they're not going to get a candle every day. And
Yeah.
but I tell them that in advance. I'm like I tell them, "Hey, not that they live in my altar, like not that they don't go with me everywhere, but I'm like, "Hey, we're leaving the house for a week. Like we are going to be gone for a week, you know, prayers to protect and watch over the house and all of
You're
that."
locking in.
And also we tell the house, we ask the because we also like I don't know, I do a lot with the land and also like
Yeah, I
spirit.
do talk to the house.
Like we both have very strong relationships with our homes. And like but I said it's the setting expectation. Like, hey guy, like hey, these people are coming over. Hey, we're gonna have a lot of people here for our wedding reception. Hey, we're going on a trip and can you just like keep it locked down while we're gone and we'll like light candles for you and give you offerings when we're back. It's just a relationship, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's and if you're gonna be unavailable to someone, you tell them. Like
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah. Well,
used
and some
to
friends you talk to every day, and sometimes
exactly.
you don't talk every day.
Right.
Yeah.
There is something too that's just popping in my head right now about what offerings are, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like for some folks, for a lot of folks, like a little bit of water or coffee beans or whiskey or rum or wine or tea or a candle. Did I already say that one? Or raising
Tobacco, any kind of
tobacco, water,
tobacco.
like there's so many like leave this on a shrine or an altar
Yeah.
offerings, but one thing for me that's really important to my practice is recognizing the other things that are offerings, like your creative practices, like
Hmm.
your writing.
Yeah.
The thing that popped in my head when you were like, I can't sit and pray the same way I do, I was like, no, but you crack a lot of jokes and you laugh a lot and you laugh fully. And I think that laughter is a kind of devotion and offering to your trickster friends that to me just rings very, very true.
I love
So
that.
Oh,
like
thank you.
yeah, like expanding your perspective on what an offering actually is, what it looks like, also can impact the way you think about the daily relationship that you have. Because yeah, I pray when I'm drinking my coffee, and when I'm done with my coffee, I go to work. But like every time I write a
Yeah.
spread, to me that's mercurial devotion because of my relationship with Mercury and
Yeah.
what I do for a living, and it's part of my practice. I don't call it that all the time, but it's it's part of the work. So I
Hmm.
just wanted to say that before we shifted away from.
No, I love that. I love that. I feel very similarly about the planets. I am often asked if I have like different altars or shrines to the planets, and I generally know. Some, but not most. And I'm also like, but my newsletters are offerings. I'm like, the literal work I do helps other people to be in relationship more deeply and to
Mhm.
better understand the planets in their own lives. And I think that
Mhm.
that is a kind of stewardship,
Yeah.
priesthood. I don't fucking know. But I'm like, I'm doing the work of translating them every day. So I'm not overly concerned about not having an altar to Mars in my house. Um, Regarding pacts, agreements, fine print, this is going to be so quick, but I just really feel strongly, and I think part of this is because early on, once I like decided that deity work was something I did want to do, there was one who very obviously came forward, and this was around the time that I was really in the throes of working on Heretic. And like I had the book deal, I was drafting. And this is a deity who there is a lot of really fraught stuff about, and also who I'm not going to say who it is publicly, but like who there's a lot of fraught stuff about, and who there are a lot of stories of online that you'll find of like very prominent practitioners who work with this spirit, who are like, I've devoted my whole life. There is such a like, and I don't doubt them. I absolutely believe that they have made that kind of intensive agreement. But consequently, some of them were very, and I was again so grateful to Meg's point about how practitioners who've been doing this a little longer can sometimes help to guide. They can also sometimes harm, but they can also help to like point you in a direction. And they were like, when you make an agreement with this spirit, be very specific about the timeline that you are going to do. So when I decided I wanted to like make a shrine to them and also build more of a working relationship and how they would support the book, I was like, cool, we'll do a year. And it was a very wonderful year. It was a very intense year. But sure enough, at that end of that year, like they felt gone. Like they had felt like a much more regular presence than other spirits that I was used to working with. And so it was very palpable and very notable to me. It was like, but I was like, oh, that was the agreement though. Like we said that like a year and that's done. And not that they're gone forever, but like I had a little bit of a mourning process about that. Again, because of my own worldview, my own history being like, well, spirit in Jesus, like, well, he's with you forever and ever and he's always there. And it's like, not all spirit relationships are on the same tier. Not all of them are lifelong. Not all, some of them are for a specific purpose, a specific season, because you live in a specific place. Like, not all of them are created equal. And I think that as someone who historically loves to throw myself into religious fervor and devotion, that has been a big learning curve for me that I'm definitely still learning. That, like, some are just more situational, more temporary, just for like this one kind of thing, not necessarily talking to them every day or let alone every month. Like, yeah, I'll pause there. Yeah. But I just wanted to say that too, that like being really mindful with language, because like, I don't think that spirit is inherently moral. I don't think it and especially, oh dear God, like I would never want to seek out working with the good people. They're the good folk, they're the good neighbors. And also, who, again, fine print, y'all, like, be really, really fucking mindful with what you're offering, with what you're agreeing to. One of the few things that I think fantasy books often get right about agreements with spirit and making deals. It's like a lot of them are not bound, they're not human, they're not bound by our ideas of what is more inherently moral. This is a really long tangent. I'm gonna stop.
It's not. It's totally
No,
not a
it's a good
tangent
one.
in
Like,
any way, shape, or form. It's
mhm.
really making me think of, like, I've recently realized, oh, if you were to look at my shrine or look at my list of the specific deity connections that I have, they're all three energy. And so, in a way, like, I am tending to
Mm-hmm.
three energy kind of always. It just has different faces. And so that's been funny to look at. But I think the idea of like knowing what you're offering and the specificity about the relationship is really key. But it shouldn't keep anyone from starting a relationship.
Yes.
It just, every relationship at some point has to DTR, has to be defined. And
Mhm.
so I think if you are defining things too quickly, i.e., me and the crows, then that's an experience you can have. But also, my very first offering to, I will just say it out loud, to Hegate, to Hecate, was genuinely just that. It was like,
Mm.
I want to open the door to this. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to leave this offering that was shared with me by another practitioner. I think other practitioners are totally part of our
Yeah.
our journeys, and like I too have gone to readers and been like, "Hey, everyone I've ever talked to has been like, "Whoa, your spiritual control room is loud and full." And I'm like, "Okay, but who are they? Like who are the people pushing the buttons?" And they're
Yeah,
like,
like what
"Are-
what's happening here? What am I
no."
talking to?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, so many readers to me have been like, "Whoa, you come with a group." And I'm like, "Can you see their faces? Can you see their names?
Yeah.
Like, want to tell me anything about them?" Um,
Like, help a girl out here.
Yeah.
but also an unknown spiritual blob, like I pray to those named and unnamed. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are ways to again address, like you
Yeah.
don't need specificity throughout every aspect of devotional practice. Like I think there's a beauty to being like this spirit team is
Mm-hmm.
never going, well, never say never, but like this spirit team has yet to reveal themselves to me.
Yeah.
Maybe they are one by one. And at the end of it, I'll be like, oh my God, it was all of you the whole time. But
Also,
like,
though, like, not to be again so Jesus-y about, I'm so sorry. You know what? I'm gonna stop apologizing. If people are still
No, stop
listening, they know.
apologizing. We come from a
But
Jesus background. Jesus is here.
But that's the
Like,
whole thing, right? Like that when Paul was in Greece, when the apostle Paul was in Greece, like his in into proselytizing was by by preaching in front of and like articulating that they had a temple in Athens to the unknown God, because that pantheon had such a space for exactly what you're saying of like we don't know everything. Like
yeah.
we don't, not everything can be named. Like yeah, just to
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think that's that Lilith space. That's it. So with Hecate, like my first offering to her was just like a, hey, I want to open the door to
Mhm.
this. This is something somebody else said you like. If you don't, let me know what you like in
Yeah.
some other way and I'll get you that. But it really was just like a door opening. And so when I personally am saying like work with her, that looks so different than I ever thought that it was going to. Like, yes, it's coming into some kind of clarity, I think. That's so funny. I think now more than ever, but this has been like years in the making.
Mhm.
And about a little over a year ago, I remember having like a conversation with her where I was kind of wanting more, honestly. Like I was at that point where
Mhm.
I was like, hey, if we're going to define this, like I am interested in something more than we have now. And her response was like very firm and lovely and also kind of brutal. And she was yeah, I'm here. So like call me. But that's
That's
on you,
so real.
boo. Like a little bit.
I
Yeah, it was
love her
like
so much.
if
She's
you
like,
want
girl, I haven't
more,
gone anywhere.
Wow.
just
That's
be here.
rude,
Yeah.
you know. That's rude.
Yeah,
That's
Well,
also
no,
very
but it was real.
she's
It's
great.
like, and then it's like, yeah, if, a year goes by and you don't call a friend for a
yeah.
year, like, it really was like no hard feelings. Like, I'm here when you're ready, but it
Yeah.
was truly like, yeah, you haven't called. And so you opened the door. I said yes, obviously. Like we're in relationship, but then like you have to take me on
Yeah.
a date if you want me to put out at the end. And I was like, okay, I
But
hear
also,
you.
yes. And that's like, also, again, that kind of more, again, it is relationship, but it also often is transactional.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
it's like I give offerings to my ancestors to empower them to do things for me. That is what I do it. Like, yes, it has been very healing. It's actually been so, so healing also as someone who is like deeply estranged from my parents and most of all of my natal family, my sister accepted. Um, Doing this like deep ancestral work has been so moving and so helpful and given me also such compassion for my parents in like some weird perverse ways, but like I'm not gonna have a relationship with them, but I'm like, but I'll talk to your dead parents and I'll talk to the like, hundreds of years old ancestors who show up. Brief caveat, I see part of my work as a white woman in the United States. Like most of my family lines like were on the first ships coming over. So like, it's like the one that wasn't actually is the one that's most active for me, but like a lot of them were like very much in the settler colonizer 17th century situation. So like I see a lot of my role as like ancestral cleanup and also like deploying my like ex-military soldier like white male ancestors like in service of protecting local protest, like that kind of thing. But when I started this work, and I come from a family that's like obsessed with genealogy and that is very lucky in having a lot of written record, that I've had access to for most of my life, I wanted to work with the women. I'm like, hi, I'm gay, and also men suck, and also I like love women, and I love my grandmothers, and I was close to my grandmothers, and all this other stuff, and I was like, women, women, like I'm gonna do my mother's line primarily, like for a few reasons, my mother's line is not very accessible to me. This kind of work also looks different depending on what spiritual tradition someone is working in. But you, like me, dear listener, may have a relative or a parent or like just someone who you don't even know in your family tree who low key is like doing a lot of ancestral work. And consequently, it kind of becomes an almost gargoyle gatekeeper of that line. Like if there's someone in your family who's like tending, literally doing the work of like tending graves, genealogy, like all of that, they do death work. And they are very clear. I'm like, once, not to be like once they die, because I'm not excited for that. I don't want that. I do not crave that. Like, but death is an inevitability. And when they do pass, they will, I'm like, my mother's line is going to get freed up because this person will not be doing that mundane material work anymore. Conversely, my father's line, those assholes are so fucking loud. It's like a party over there. Everyone I've ever had this kind of reading with has been like, your mom's line? Weird. Your dad's? Wow, it's a party. Like they are raging. It's very much like a boys club over there, but like I have come to appreciate the ways in which my father's line does a lot for me and can do a lot for me if I get over my and like work, not to say get over, but if I work through my own bullshit about not liking men. But yeah, just to say that ancestral work can be really finicky and really weird and strange, and certain things can feel more accessible than others. And also that as a queer person, while I do primarily work with ancestors of blood, those are the ones I'm talking to most every day. I also do a fair amount of work with queer ancestors of spirit, like queer writers, people who maybe never had kids, but like they're really prominent figures in queer history. I do offerings for them. And I think that there are just a lot of ways to appreciate like how someone may be an ancestor or a descendant that do not have anything to do with blood ties.
I want to say this just because it's relevant right here, right now, but Queer Devotion
Oh,
by
yes.
Charlie Claire Burgess that just came out.
Literally
Yeah.
reading it this morning.
It's a great resource for anyone who is interested in kind of this overall umbrella, but does not feel a way in based on culture, society, narrative. Like
Yeah.
this is very much not only a resource for the curiosity research work that we're talking about like getting to know figures in new and different and expansive ways, but then also a really practical handbook of like how to build a devotional practice that looks and feels like you.
Mm-hmm. And you can use one of Charlie's tarot decks. like the Gay Marseille, and the
Yeah,
Fifth Spirit Tarot to do that divinatory conversational work, asking questions to spirit and getting answers in the tarot. Like we're just the
totally.
Charlie Claire Burgess advertisement right now, and it's
Fangirl,
We're
great.
yeah.
we're all fans.
Mhm.
They're great.
Yeah, yeah.
No notes.
Just an example of like another practitioner hopping in and then leading me to something. Like
Mm.
when I look in the rear view, and a lot of times for me, hindsight really is 2020, and that's the only way that I can follow these like breadcrumbs and be like, oh wow, okay. But last summer for my birthday, I put out a call to anybody who wanted to pull a card for me or send a message or, whatever. And a really amazing friend, client, fellow practitioner, colleague, everything, Christine of Zen Wellness Goddess. She's amazing.
Mm.
Christine, we'll link her. But she pulled me a card and wrote with it. She was like, actually, this message does not feel like this card to me, but this is what's coming through. Like there is an ancestor, a male ancestor that wants to come forward and wants to essentially help to teach emotional tending, which was
Mm.
the card was the Queen of Cups. So she was like, it's very weird that like a male ancestor is coming through, but it was like, there's lessons here about just emotional equanimity
Mm.
and tending. And I knew almost immediately that it was my great grandfather on my mother's side. And so I just started asking questions about him. And
Mm.
what came through really quickly was like very proud of his Norwegian, like Nordic heritage. And so looking back, like that was a huge impetus into me starting to learn about the Norse mythology and like the Norse pantheon of gods. And so that to me is like so where I mean Loki is like the one Norse deity that has come through as like, hey, we are going to be working together. And again, three energy, I can't get away from it. But that definitely was like the impetus. And so there's and much, much more. But I can see how that through line is there. Yeah, I had a whole funeral for my dad's side of the family, and specifically so that they
Wow.
were not interested in, it wasn't even that they weren't interested in working with me. They were like, we
Mm.
are not interested in being an ancestral line, like lay us to rest. It was like
Oh,
everybody was so disinterested. Yeah.
wow.
And so I was working on Witch's Book of Numbers. It was
Mhm.
not anywhere near being published, but it was like somewhere in the deal. And I knew that I wanted to use my maiden name. And so the funeral was like laying them to rest and like honestly letting them off the hook, like cutting that cord a
Yeah.
little bit, but also like
Wow.
clearing the name so that I could use it in a different way. Then after that, I have two artifacts from like two inherited things from my dad's side of the family, but only one of them is a blood relative to me. And the
Yeah.
other one is a total trickster. And I haven't thought about that until just now. And I'm like, oh, this is fascinating that
Cool.
I am going to have to think about because I have, yeah, I have two material possessions that are both creative tools, a typewriter and a sewing machine. And I haven't used
Wow.
either of them yet because it just like hasn't felt right, or been physically possible, but one day it will be. And yeah, my step grandmother who has like, if you want to talk about magical pacts and bonds like between people and
Mm.
spirits, oof, fraught. But she was a huge part of my life. And upon her death, we basically learned that everything we know about her is like not real. And we'll literally never know this woman who was like in our lives for so long.
Icon. An
Yeah.
icon.
Yeah,
Icon.
like we'll truly never know anything real about her. And like, yeah, like everything we knew was a lie. And like, not only a lie, like truly not possible. Like, once we found out post mortem, like, we're like, oh, that's not like her series of events is like not even logistically possible. Crazy. So I'm gonna have to think about what that means that I have so many things in here. Um, And then the typewriter is from her husband, my blood grandfather,
Mm.
who passed away when I was really young, who is the only member of our family that had a rare form of cancer. So again, things are still unfolding
Yeah.
like they always are.
Yeah.
But I actually am really grateful for this conversation for many reasons.
Yeah.
But one of them that's coming forward for me right now is just to feel what it's like to be like years into
Hmm.
relationship and be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, that is what I'm in. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is the way
Yeah.
that we've tended to that.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have this check-in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this has been so lovely. There's like one story that's just nice. It's gonna hopefully gonna be short. It underlines like 5 times the importance of doing research
Mhm.
and whether into your own ancestral stuff or just like research into varying mythologies around the world here in the West, like especially in like, white supremacist culture. Like there are certain like kinds of myth like the elevation even that we all know Greek mythology and like even to an extent
Mhm.
Roman, some Egyptian, but like and like Norse mythology as well, but like that a lot of other kinds of mythologies that were largely oral traditions have been either like lost or really just like their prominence is diminished. And this is why research is important. It's because sometimes like you'll be having a reading with someone. Actually, the one I'm thinking of was one that I had with the same psychic who Meg mentioned earlier. And she was kind of doing a who's coming through kind of, situation. And there was one male god who was so loud. And she was like, are you? And it was from the Norse pantheon. And she was like, are you? She was like, you're not like Scandinavian. I was like, absolutely not. Like, not literally no Scandinavian heritage. I have no interest in the not like no interest. I'm academically very curious, but like and love to read, but like I do not have any relationships with any deities out of the Norse pantheon. And she was like, "Well, this is who it is because this is what I'm seeing." But it never felt right to me. She was like, "Maybe you get a rune set, like maybe you read some about Norse like stuff, like." And I did, but I was like, it doesn't feel correct. It doesn't feel right. Not because I don't like this deity. I think they're awesome, but like I feel nothing. I feel no connection. Shockingly, like not shocking, about a year later, I'm actually doing research into like mythologies related to my own heritage. And it is so obviously this one much less known male, still a guy, deity from that pantheon. I was like, oh, but I knew like in my bones, I was like, oh, that's who it was. But again, even a practitioner who is like so tapped in is only going to have access to their own library of references and their own research. And so there may be like different kinds of spirits from whether it's out of your own ancestral or heritage or whatnot that like they can get close to identifying, but they maybe can't exactly identify. And that's just part of what underlines, I think, how important those the devotional act of learning is to this practice. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. It reminds me, B, when you were talking about when you said that your friend was talking about it's weird that the Queen of Cups came up because
Mhm.
this male
Mm.
god is here. And I was immediately like, well, first of all, queen is anything. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
second of all, if you research other names for queens, you're coming up with things like guardian and protector and teacher and mentor and very gender neutral roles that are about protecting and tending and caregiving
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
investing in the safety and growth long term and legacy of something, which is has nothing to do with gender and has everything to do with
Mhm.
what matters and what the role is. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, to your point, like yeah, research is often a really beautiful form of devotion, and
Mhm.
yeah, and it gives you space to then have more language for things, different
Yeah.
words, different ideas, different faces. Yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
really cool. I think that's really cool. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's so full circle to what
Mhm.
like we've always been talking about the like idea that this spiritual realm exists can
Hmm.
be instilled in us in many different ways,
Hmm.
but it's that connection that keeps us kind of going back to those workings. And
Hmm.
so if you are listening to this and you're like, I've always known that there's a spirit realm and felt connected, but like looking to take that to another level or get more specific or whatever, I think sometimes starting really broad is so key. Like that's what I was trying to get at with the, I know there are different faces, but they're all three energy. And so that's like,
Hmm.
for me, that's what keeps them all housed together. And so that works for me. But at the same time, like I think your point, Gina, earlier, which is that you can trace Inanna to Aphrodite to Mother Mary,
Yeah.
like there are so many faces.
Yeah.
And yeah, just really permissioning yourself to learn about them all or like
Hmm.
follow those unexpected threads and really full circle back to authority and like free will is
Yeah.
like this is a relationship that you are in. So your feelings about it, your inclinations, your compulsions, like all of that matters to the relationship. I
Yeah.
have a lot of
And
ancestor things to think about after this conversation.
yeah, I feel like I can like see see
Yeah.
things
Well,
clicking.
this doesn't have to go in there, but I'm pretty sure this great grandfather, well, because I was thinking that the emotional tending that this great grandfather was offering to me with Loki sometimes is like staying centered or like open to the harsher aspects of life or like the
Yeah.
shocks or the surprises in a way that you can still stay very much like present in the moment. That lesson has really served me well in
Hmm.
my life, but also thinking about this great grandfather as someone who died also when I was young, which
Hmm.
is the same as this other grandfather on the other side of the family. Um, but he died very young, and I was more a part of that process than like any other family member at the time. And I'm pretty sure that he died of leukemia, which
Hmm.
is the sister to lymphoma.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting that these
Wow.
two male ancestors that have actually the three male ancestors that I do have present tense open relationships with were all chronically ill.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I've never put the pieces together like that before.
Mm. Yeah.
It's crazy.
So juicy. So this is the
So
problem is I'm like,
juicy.
we could just keep going. Like I have
I
so
know
much more to
we could
say,
literally
but
do this for
like,
another 2 hours.
but
Like,
we've been going for a minute and
yeah.
this might
No.
be in the running for our longest episode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you
Yeah.
for this so much.
Thank you both for this. This has been so good and heart-filling and yeah.
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 All right, cool. Stay safe and well, and we'll talk to you soon.
Love y'all.